Next, he was childlike in the sense that, children are so open-faced, how they approach. That's what's so disarming about them. That's what makes child abuse so terrible, actually, when that's abused this way. And so in this sense, he was very childlike. And in being so childlike, true maturity was manifested in the world. See? The maturity of the childlike, spontaneous presence this way. Second, next. When he said alcohol, everyone was silenced. It was the Logos that came out of a deep place that silences. And Nicholas of Cusa, I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday or not. I love Nicholas of Cusa, one of these mystics. We'll do him in Turning to the Mystics podcast. He said, when it comes to such matters, they must be ineffably expressed and incomprehensibly understood. Is that clear? Yes. In other words, you understand it, but you don't understand it comprehensively. That is, it isn't because there's a concept that explains it, but there's an intuitive, poetic, underlying kind of musical quality to an understanding that's not reducible to an explanation. So it's incomprehensibly understood, and it's ineffably expressed. It's expressed ineffably, and that's why these conferences are so hard to take notes on, because it's ineffable. That's right. And so it's the living Logos in the world, spoken in the world this way, which are the words of lovers, the words of the cry of the poor, the healing word, the poetic word, the creative word, the Logos, this living word that resonates in our lives this way. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us this way. Next. In this moment, with these people coming up and hugging him, this with the tears coming down, it was a hospice. Because the alcoholic, and having the authority to have the final say on who he was dying right at this moment. So this is hospice care. And because it's hospice care, it was a maternity ward. Because being born out of the broken place was the liberation of himself. See, if addiction, any destructive addictive pattern to alcohol or anger or food or sexual, whatever the addictive pattern is, see, it's a kind of a death in life. It has a numbing, kind of compromising feeling. And then in liberation from it, it's life out of death. It's the alchemy, the bittersweet alchemy of this emergence of this life. It's like a miracle this way for ourselves, like this. And next, I also realized in watching this was not the end of a journey for him. It was the beginning of a long one. Because he was going to have to walk his walk with his fearless inventory and amends and walking in the beloved community of healed, broken people that would receive him this way. This is the thing about AA too. Well, all that counts to be present at the meeting is that you can come drunk as long as you want to stop. You can come drunk every night as long as you want to stop. That's the key. You really want to stop. And you know that by yourself you're powerless to stop. But you have hope because you're in a whole room full of people that were just like you. And they bear witness of something that's possible for you this way. And we draw strength from each other this way. Next. When we see something in a very dramatic way, it helps us to recognize it in a more subtle way. Does that make sense in a way? When something is stunning, then you start to see a pattern that was there all the time, but it was so delicate we didn't notice it. And At the time I was starting to see people in psychotherapy under supervision. I was in my last year, and I was seeing people in a private practice this way. And so I drove from the hospital, and I was in this private practice. I was interning under this person, and that evening, I was seeing a woman in therapy, a young woman. She had been married for a little less than a year, and she was depressed. She came in because she was depressed. And as it turns out, when we were talking in the opening session, that she was in an abusive marriage. Her husband didn't physically abuse her, but he was emotionally demanding and harsh, and ridiculing her and putting her down. It was endless, just endless. She was depressed. And she was describing the depression to me and what was going on. I said, well, why are you here? What would you hope would happen? She said, well, I'm here to save my marriage. She said, as a matter of fact, my husband insisted I come to therapy so that I could become the wife he deserves. He drove me over here. And he's going to pick me up outside, and he's going to make me tell him everything you said to see if you measure up. Because if you're not effective enough in making me the woman he deserves, he's going to take me to another therapist. And we were drinking tea. I used to give people, I don't do that anymore. I used to give people tea. But I stopped doing it because right at the critical moments, they take a sip. So I took the tea away. If they asked for tea, I gave them tea. Sip all you want, I don't care. It won't help. Sorry. But anyway, they were drinking tea. And I said to her, what if you decide you want to work with me? And at the beginning of each session, I threw my hot tea on you. And I said, the goal of therapy is to get used to that. What would happen to you inside if you ever did? And I said, maybe this is why you're depressed. And she stopped like this, and this is the axial moment. This is the turning moment. And she said in a low voice, she said, maybe the reason I'm trying so hard to save my marriage is I don't believe I have a right to save myself. And a tear came and hit the back of her hand. I saw it that way. And I said to her, I said, you know, the way you are right now with me, I feel so privileged and nurtured to be in your presence this way. I do. Because the way you are right now, and by the way, this is the way her father treated her mother, and it's the way her father treated her. Ritualistic reenactment. We're kind of dramatically drawn to ritualistically reenact what traumatized us this way. And I said, and this is what your father didn't see in you, where he wouldn't have treated you the way that he did. And by the way, it's what your husband doesn't see in you, because if he did, he wouldn't treat you this way. He wouldn't. He really wouldn't. And I said, I have good news and hard news. The good news is this is real. This is the preciousness of yourself. This is who you are. The hard news is this. By the time you get halfway down the hall, it'll reclaim you again. And when you get in the car, it'll be right there waiting for you. And I said, you know, I said, you have a right to the privacy of your own healing. And you can tell your husband it's personal. Personal. You can do that. I didn't think she would be. She wasn't able to, by the way. And because you have a right to live your life. By the way, notice it isn't just that you're not happy in this marriage. Your husband's not happy either. It's a lose-lose situation. You're ritualistically reenacting a sad story together. And I asked her once, I said, when he talks to you this way, I said, do you ever do anything about it? And she said, no, I don't do anything. See, this is giving external compliance to avoid being attacked or abandoned, see, as a survival strategy. This way. She said, well, once I did. We were eating dinner, and he was yelling at me because the dinner wasn't cooked correctly. And in his anger, he reached over and grabbed some of my mashed potatoes off of my plate and threw it against the wall. And she said, something in me snapped. And I reached over and took some mashed potatoes off of his plate and threw it against the wall. And he said, this won't work with both of us being like this. Now, the man was a prophet, really. He was really on to something. And she said, I never did it again. I never did it again. It's interesting how we can be held in something, and it's so scary to break free from what holds us in bondage this way, but we long to be free from it this way. And this is sometimes why we need someone to be able to see us and listen to us and give us a footing in our own life this way. And I guess ultimately what love is about, to be seen like that. And 2 days, we made the appointment, and 2 days later she called and canceled. She said, I'm not coming back. My husband said I can't come. And it's like that. But sometimes you have to believe that maybe you planted a seed. And even though that person wasn't able to respond at the time, months or years later, it's a part of a story, because it has to break open in its own way. We can't make it happen. We can't make anything happen. You can't force it open.